Embrace life with a change for the better. Challenge your comfort zone with Glenn Miller, your personal comfort zone coach, enabling you, in whatever way you may need to step outside your comfort zone. The Outside Your Comfort Zone podcast explores proactive and practical tips based on years of lessons learned and expert skills and advice that will enable you to accomplish more. Each episode puts a spotlight on topics and experts in their field who will compel you to action and to get more things done outside your comfort zone.
Thank you for having me.
Don't be ridiculous. This is it's totally overwhelming. I think for our listeners who don't know, Darcy and I connected, probably 18 months ago now to get into a podcast environment for me, launch. But Darcy's you've been much more than that. You've been a mentor and a bit of a podcast coach, just visiting your website. And for the listeners, it says it all. But I think that's the challenge today. And I think I'd said to you, I really want to get you on the show and try and expose from you. You know, if we can get you outside your comfort zone, then we've broken a big barrier.
I'm already outside of my comfort zone. Normally I'm on the other side of the recording desk, hitting the buttons and making podcasts sound great. So mission accepted already, but I'm excited for this chat.
And I think it's always difficult because, people don't know you, people haven't met you, obviously. So I think it's always helpful if you can help with a bit of a stadium pitch.
Yeah, great. My name is Darcy. We got that. I am 28 years old. Fast approaching 29. I started my career professionally in radio. So as a kid at school, I had this fantastic deal with my principal where every Thursday he would let me go to a radio station and learn radio.
Wow.
Rather than doing sport, which I was never much good at anyway. So I learned radio from a really young age. That meant that when I turned 17, I was able to come and work in Today FM here in Sydney and learn from some of my mentors, some of these people who I totally idolized. I built a really fantastic career in radio, worked in radio for 12 years, and then quit radio to start this ProPodcast production where we help anyone start a podcast that looks and sounds their best. It fills me so much working with individuals like yourself, working with people, hearing their stories, and then working out how best to present that in the podcast space. I started that in 2016. I made the leap to do it full-time 2 years ago, just before COVID. And we sit here today in a beautiful office in Barangaroo with a team of 4 and touch wood, but so far so good.
I can think only strength to strength, Darcy. But it's interesting in your story. So that principle identified something in you, which really changed your life, if you think about it. And I think that's quite remarkable because, we all try to push ourselves to find that thing in life we love doing. And I admire those people. Mm-hmm. So shout out to your principal. Because I think for you, it wouldn't have happened.
No.
If you hadn't seen that talent in you.
Oh, 100%. And I think recognizing passion and setting people up to explore that and have fun with it. And I was really lucky early on in radio. My home life wasn't great. And so I found some fantastic, not only just radio mentors, but real leadership, real fantastic, almost dad figures who really took me under their wing and allowed me to explore this passion.
So it's interesting, and I know I'm partially cutting you off here because when we spoke about what we can speak about, and previous guests, and we're growing. We've had season 1, this is season 2.
Yeah.
Not that I've pulled the rabbit out the hat on them, but through your guidance and advice, actually, we just let things go where they go.
Yeah.
I can feel in some of the bullet points you shared that there's a lot of stuff behind you, the man Darcy, that's been quite challenging and difficult. We're going to get into that as we go. But I do just want to frame for the audience listening that it's not just about us recording today and, recording another episode. I think what's inspiring for me is how humble you are. And when I look at the lineup, you've worked with Apple, you've worked with majors, right? IKEA. You've got quite a cross section there. And I take a note, a moment in time. I know you're a humble guy. You don't really want the accolades. That's the feeling I've come to learn. But I think what's incredible is, within there, you've got names and I have taken notes here because you've got this guest book of Drew Barrymore and Miranda Kerr. These are, past prime ministers almost of Australia, and Jessica Malcolm Albert. Like these are phenomenal names. So I'm humbled being here. Thank you for having me to interview. But all of that aside, I think it really speaks in volumes, obviously, of the type of experiences you've had. And I think life chooses us more than sometimes we choose it. So pulling it together, you've got this principal who saw and identified that early on. And then you've got this amazing lineup of businesses and names that you've worked with. I think, firstly, could you just talk about that a little bit for the audience? Like, what's it been like working with these people? I know I'm asking you a few questions here, but when you worked in radio, right? There's obviously such a span. You're in the background, but your engagements and working with these people, what's that been like?
Oh, it is incredible. I mean, as a 17-year-old, my first week of work, so once I got the full-time job and moved to Sydney, the first week of work was like day one. It's like at 3:00, Snow Patrol's going to come, who I loved at the time as a kid.
Oh, wow.
And you've got to record them. And you've got to direct them on like, how's it sounding? And you've got to record them. And like, it's just going to be you. Because my management was remote. They were working out of Melbourne. And it was this real, I think, imposter syndrome kicks in pretty quick where you go, man, are they going to find out that I'm just a 17-year-old kid? And then the next day it was going and recording like a huge LMFAO, you know, like these people who were relevant at the time, not so relevant now, but it is an amazing experience and one I'm really thankful for. To be around and work for some fantastic names. It was a highlight for me being able to record the Ed Sheeran and the Taylor Swifts and handle the production pressure that comes with that. You know, you can't get that wrong. Often you would pile into a van, you would get out, you'd have 4 minutes to set up. And each radio host has been allocated such a short amount of time. You've got to make sure all the mics are working. You've got to make sure everyone's happy. And then you've got to ensure that you save it.
Did you ever forget to hit the record button?
I thankfully never forgot to hit the record button, but there are stories of people who did. And so radio gave me this wonderful view that, like, we're all just humans. And so we attach labels like superstars to these different people, but seeing them in a different environment and seeing them behind the scenes, you go, we're all just people. We've got our stuff. We have our talents. We're all just going through this journey of life. And I think that's where it made me really comfortable working with these types of people. And so when I went out on my own, it became a skill set I didn't recognize because I was so just used to doing it day in and day out. And now in the podcast space where you've got hosts wanting to connect with these people and the IKEAs, and we're doing a series with the Oscars, all of these crazy projects are happening. But for me, I always take that mindset of, you're just working with people, you know, and you just are there to get the best out of them. And you can't think of the pressure too much.
And that's why this is like such an incredible opportunity, because that's exactly the feeling I've always had with you. You know, that's the humbleness I'm speaking of, but also I think as people, we all so much on Instagram and TikTok and the kids now Snapchat, and everyone's a celebrity. My daughter was interviewed by the Fonz. You know, I don't know if you've wasn't such a good edit, to be honest, because it didn't show up. The content that came out was left much to be desired. But that's my point. It's like, you know, you're seeing these celebrities and they people, you know, and I think from little kids, we admire cricketers and sports people and politicians. Yeah. But you've lived in a world around these people. So I think that's interesting and probably a good segue. You, from a feelings and emotion, you've become quite level and comfortable around celebrity.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe we can frame it that way, or just high profile, I suppose. Yeah. But you normalize it. And there's such a powerful thing that comes from speaking, I think. Like, I didn't realize until I started the podcast, I write, I'm an author. But, you know, you've mentioned to me you've had moments of anxiety through your past.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like quite a yin yang. So on the one hand, I would expect if you're in this world amongst giants, the anxiety of that, most might think, wow, huge anxiety, but that's not what you're speaking about with the anxiety part of,
whoa,
right? I hit you in the guts there.
Mate, it is what version of yourself you're referring to. I think you're absolutely right. Anxiety has played a huge part in my life. I grew up with OCD. OCD was a real coping mechanism for me to take control of what was a unpredictable growing up situation. And when I say OCD, I mean flicking light switches. I mean, compulsive hand washing. That's how it manifested in early days. And then as I got older, it was like intrusive thoughts. Something I didn't even know other people went through. It's intrusive thoughts of, oh, if I'm in a relationship and I happen to just brush past someone, have I cheated with them? These real intense, non-logical thoughts. But OCD doesn't accept logic. OCD.
But Darcy, I don't want to push too deep. Like before you said that, you said, you'd been through some stuff. I mean, can we peel the layer back to understand
context
what you went through?
Yeah.
Like what led to, for you, that OCD episodic period in your life?
I grew up with parents who had the best intentions, but not the resources available to them to be fantastic parents. And so the way that looked was from my dad. My dad had bipolar, mental illness, where we would go in a cycle of he wasn't medicated. And so every year or so, we expected an episode. And when that episode happened, we would then he would often lose his job, would have to move locations and start it all fresh. So there was a 12-month cycle definitely happening from that point of view. And then my mum, through her own trauma, didn't know how to parent well, didn't know or have access to within herself to give us the needs any child needs. And so it often turned into it was quite a hectic environment. I would say it was quite an abusive environment, mainly emotional, sometimes physical. And this is all stuff that I'm just coming to realize and unpack in the last 2 years. So it's still pretty fresh, but that was kind of the upbringing. And then school wasn't great either. So I'd go from this hectic home environment and then school, I just didn't find my people. Until very late in school, and that would often result in not fitting in, and that would result in bullying. And so all of this was kind of happening. And I think that's where OCD steps in. And OCD was really helpful initially because it's giving you a sense of control in an otherwise out of control living environment.
It's a bit of a tool, a bit of a coping mechanism.
Absolutely, total coping mechanism. And then as I progressed in radio and was in these really high pressure situations, and even so in podcasting, there's so much anxiety that comes. And there's healthy anxiety. If you're going to go record a Taylor Swift, it's good to have a healthy bit of anxiety. So you pack your SD cards and you don't muck up that recording. But there's a great analogy of who's driving the bus today. Is it your anxious self? Is it your healthy self? And over time, more and more, from the time I would wake up to the time I'd go to bed, it's just my anxious self driving the bus in life. And so that led to a point where 2 years ago, I finally did something about it.
But sorry to interrupt you. Yeah. Did you find yourself living in a headspace? I know that sounds weird. It's a bit like people that have described long COVID. It's like you wake up in the morning, there's a fuzzy cloud in your head.
Yeah, for me.
Would you say that you almost, because in previous podcasts I've spoken about, like I wake up happy in the morning. I'm a positive person.
Sure.
I get that from mum.
Yeah.
But some people don't.
Yeah.
And I guess, would you say, what I'm seeing is like almost this trend where some of us live in our head. Like you wake up and we go through times through the month, where you have not just hardship and like in your case here, anxiety, but where you actually have this fog in your head where you're thinking about it all the time. Is that?
Oh yeah.
Was that obvious? Yeah,
very obvious in terms of the anxious thoughts and feelings and emotions that would come with that. And the headspace was just almost someone had flicked a switch and it was just permanent state of anxiety. Now, the great thing about that is it made me a really high performer. The downside of that is it's exhausting. It affects your relationships. It affects how you run a business. I mean, when you step into the business field, it just amplifies any of the qualities that you have. And so,
and you're talking about that anxiety where, like you said, brushing past a person, that OCD quality that was almost fueling your pace.
Yes.
That kind of anxiety, like it's just merging all into one and creating a storm.
Yeah. It was this awful, perfect storm of anxiety and high pressure roles that kind of fed off each other, I think. I am very much at a place where I'm learning how to deal with it now. But certainly at the time, I think the best word is distressing. it's distressing. It's these thoughts that are coming, whether they're intrusive thoughts or they're just general anxiety, that is distressing and tears you apart. And it's really hard it's like a duck underwater. I mean, on the surface, you can be calm and collected in these moments, but underwater, there's so much happening. And so whilst it wasn't a fogginess, it was an awareness looking back now of like, man, those little duck legs are going fast.
So feeling emotion.
Just
boiling up all the time.
All the time.
And as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, I grew up probably the absolute opposite. Like, parents there for you, and it's just honing straight in on the advice side of it.
Right.
And I think that's, even for parents out there listening, what I'm hearing you describe is like this complete cluster of emotion. And I think a parent's job is to also listen to kids and help them unpack those things.
Sure.
And diving into that story of yours, maybe that you didn't have that outlet and you had a whole lot of worry there about your dad and mum and, well, what's in store for the next cycle.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe it's also just too difficult.
I think it's hard to blame people.
Of course.
Because there's so much to it. There's so many dynamics.
And it doesn't help.
And it doesn't help.
It doesn't change anything.
It doesn't change anything. But yeah, I don't think they were in a position where they couldn't necessarily meet the needs of us kids. And there's a lot of kids. So what I haven't mentioned is that I grew up with 5 sisters.
Wow.
So there's 6 of us, only boy in the house. There's 6 of us. And that is a whole wonderful.
Where did you fit in the pecking order?
Like second youngest.
Okay.
So I've got all of this older sisters happening. And then I've got a little sister. And it's just a crazy environment. A crazy environment of all of these people with their own things happening.
I had a friend who has 9 siblings.
Wow.
Yeah, in the community. And it's the only bigger number from what you've quoted that I have life experience about. But they, it's difficult. Like they were kind of up there as the older child. But I think when you've got so many siblings, the dynamic's really weird because I think even mum and dad, we've got 3 children. When we had 2 children, my wife and I each had 1. It's literally how we thought of it when the third came, because you never can't have love. You always have love for your kids.
Sure.
But time is the issue.
Yeah.
Once the third comes in, you're outnumbered.
Yeah.
And it's quite difficult.
Yeah.
It's like, and so I couldn't even imagine beyond 4. My brother's got 4. Right. But if you start getting to the 6 zone, where I'm going with it is I think the ones on the bottom can sometimes lose out because mum and dad are used to having the older ones around early on. Yeah. And then the flip side of that, in some situations, like my friends, sometimes the older ones, they're fine. They're looking after themselves. Yeah. We got to help the little ones.
Yeah.
So you can't win.
No.
You can't win. No. But I think it's interesting because you spoke about your sister and just offline and the lead into guardianship and things like that. Yeah. So I'd imagine it's quite difficult, like anxiety and where you were at. And I suppose leading towards that, I'd love to understand that side of things. But I suppose just to take the context, you've had all this anxiety. You're saying you're recording for Taylor Swift and some amazing people. Yeah. So like what point did you realize that some things may be a bit wrong here, or the way I'm handling life? And when did it explode?
It was this beautiful crossroad. Well, not beautiful, but a thankful crossroad where my little sister came into the picture. We had just got back from a trip to Bali where we were living our best life for a week, very relaxed, came back and immediately a situation unfolded where my mum was no longer in a position to look after my little sister and essentially said, I don't know, it doesn't matter where you go, but it just can't be here anymore. And my wife and I saw that situation unfold and obviously did whatever we could to intervene. And that led us to a position where we took on kind of full guardianship of my little sister. And not like she just came to hang out with us. It was, oh no, like there's no contact with the family. We'll take responsibility and are responsible for getting her through her final 2 years of school.
Wow.
Including paying school fees, managing the emotions of a teenager. And so that happened and it highlighted the fact that, with all of this anxiety, I can't be trying to build a business on the side, do a national radio show, because at the time it was a show called Kate Mamadi, which was the #1 radio show in the country. And every day the production I was creating was going out to 1 million+ people.
Wow.
Talk about anxiety. That alone is a lot.
Yeah.
And be a good husband and manage this.
Now a dad in part.
Yeah. Taking ownership of your sister, which is a whole different dynamic because you're not her dad, but you're taking that full responsibility for the growth of a child during that period. So that was the time where I go, oh, this isn't working. How I'm functioning might have been acceptable, at least from my wife's point of view. She was able to handle that and understood. But then you add a child into the mix as well, and you've got to make a call. And so that was the moment I made the call to leave radio and take on the ownership of my sister and have a shot at building this business. And it's a big call because, I mean, radio was a fantastically paying job where you're earning 6 figures, you're working on the best radio show within that world. But I also learned in that moment, it's okay to be good at something, to enjoy it, and still make a change for different when you need to do that. And so that was the moment where I stepped back from radio, focused on the business, and also engaged with a psychologist, which changed my life because I started understanding, the way in which you've been living a life out of this anxious place, it doesn't have to be that way. And that's where I got medication and support and the tools, which I'm still on that journey, but it was a new chapter of understanding, unpacking, and learning to live with it.
I mean, you guys would know because our last episode was with Lindsay, and she's a clinical psychologist, and you've heard my story. And for the listeners that haven't, through the previous episodes, I've covered things like tsunami and post-traumatic stress disorder. But like a few things, Darcy, like the one is you've jumped with your sister, that HSC or year 11, year 12. We've got now a 16-year-old, year 10, 11, 12. We're on the cusp of that. It's like I think it's really difficult. When you're first parents and you have your first child, there's a reason I think nature works the way it does for couples that decide they want a child.
Sure.
There's, the naturally or not, adoption or otherwise. I think just having a child is a massive responsibility. They're guidebooks, but they don't work because every child's different.
Sure.
And your wife, that unit is different.
Yeah.
But I think you coming from one world and jumping into another, again, it's this, do I need a psychologist? Did they work? I can kind of feel and sense that you've obviously had someone who's taken you through the journey. But I think the proof is in the pudding. It speaks for itself that, you sit here, you're composed, anxiety, I'm sure it's a different kind of normal stress in running a business.
Yeah.
But just like a pat on the back. I know you don't need it from me, but
I appreciate that.
It's very emotional having this conversation with you because and then it's also different because it's someone you love who's a sibling.
Yeah.
And it's like you're saying, it's this, but so you must have an amazing relationship. I'm part of I'd love to speak to your sister and see it from the other side, maybe we do that one day, but it's quite remarkable. And I think even going into quitting a 6-figure job and then coming into it on the other side, and I'm just thinking about your past. How has that experience unfolded for you? Like, would you change it because you're stuck in the rat race in a 6-figure job?
Sure.
And I suppose for anyone listening that might be sitting in that position now, of course, the grass isn't always greener.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing you say is the reward's not always the monetary outcome.
Yeah.
Because I think if you love what you do, and clearly you love what you do, sometimes you're sitting in the wrong seat, maybe.
100%. 100%. I think the grass is green where you water it.
Yeah,
is what I've come to learn. Really,
you get out what you put in.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got to preface it by saying I was fortunate enough to be at a younger age where the dependence was only my little sister at that stage and my wife, and we're living with the in-laws, and so. It was an opportunity I saw of like, okay, if you're going to make a change, now is the time to do it. People aren't fortunate in that, they are stuck in a 6-figure job, but they have a family to feed and they've got private school or, those pressures. So I think that's important to call out. But the other thing that is important to call out now, having done this journey, is realizing that when I was sitting in that seat in this beautiful studio producing this radio show, I was doing that from a place of not fear, but probably comfort. I'd earned my dues. I'd done my 10,000 hours. I was enjoying that. But then it became very clear in the last couple of years that it was a transactional thing. It was like, I'm doing this show for the financial benefit that comes with that. And that's okay for a little bit, but it ends up becoming pretty soul destroying pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And the other thing I have learned during that process is you get different buckets in life: work, friends, family, anything else. Health is a big one as well. And so you can only fill some of those buckets with a limited resource, which is your energy. And so at that time too, I was pouring all of my energy and filling the work bucket, and my financial bucket was filling up in return. But my social bucket was empty. My relationship with my wife was like empty in terms of we're best friends. So we got through that time, but I wasn't watering that spot or filling it up. And so we made the conscious choice to go, cool, there's enough in the financial bucket. Let's pour some back into family and social. And yeah, it's certainly a shock when you go from a 6-figure job to $35,000 a year. I mean, that's a lifestyle adjustment. But that was under the preface of like, I'm going to build something. I'm actually going to do something that I see passion and opportunity in, and that is podcasting, and that is helping others tell their story well and giving them access to the resources of radio that for so long was just reserved for people who could afford to be in that space. And it was a really limited bunch of people involved in that whole process. So yeah, it's one of those things where, yep, it's a big call, but in terms of the fulfillment and the other thing is fear. When you've on the other side of making that decision, you go, yeah, but what if it fails? Or what if it doesn't come out? And that is a real possibility. I mean, small business, I think it's 50% are going to fail. But the thing is, what I didn't see is I was stopping myself from experiencing all that was there to be experienced. And I stepped out, and the business is in a place where we now get to employ other people and welcome them into that space. And I think that comes from just acknowledging the fear, but pushing through that as well, getting out.
But Darcy, I think like we live in a world now where like impact is a big word, sustainability in so many different spheres. But I see this, like I've interviewed, very few relative to what you've seen. And but the common thread I'm seeing is the emotional connection, and why I love our topic, outside your comfort zone is weird, because I think the first thing is one almost looking back at what's going on, or where have I come from, or something's wrong. So it's a very there's this emotional drain, a feeling, and what's interesting is I think the time it takes once that's realized to actually acting and doing something and thrusting yourself completely outside of where you thought you'd be. Yeah. I think the how I'm going to deal with that and what that's going to look like and all those worries, I think once the decision's made, stuff actually starts to fall into place quite quickly. And it's actually a reverse anxiety, because you let go, there's all this worry, but somehow you make it come together. So what you were saying about being the driving force and, just driving the change and getting it done, I think that's the powerful part I read into your story, that you've gone through so much anxiety. And I think often there's this crescendo in our minds that prevent us from making the decision to take the leap, to change and move. And I just think it's weird, but the impact you have now on so many people is so far reaching. And it's so like, I don't know how, if the list of recordings you're doing is 20 or 100, it's a multiplier. Which is incredible. Yeah. So again, the compliments to you and how you've taken that leap. In terms of your sister, presumably that's all going well. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a great point to just what you're talking about. You can make that leap and the anxiety doesn't go away. But what you can learn to do is learn to live and manage that. And I guess that's the stage of the life I'm at. And Mags, my little sister, is doing the same. She's learning to live and manage with past trauma and her own mental health issues. And I think she's doing a really good job of that. Yeah. And I think that is a measure of success more than what degree she's doing. And mind you, she got accepted into law, which is amazing. Like, the kid is incredible. And I think,
wow, that's like,
to go through what she had gone through. I mean, Sure, it's definitely a big thing taking on guardianship, and I don't downplay that because it was a really stressful time for my wife and I, and Mags included. But we were in a position to do that, and she didn't have a choice in any of that. And so to come through her trauma and her pain and get to a place where she's very much on the road to continue thriving, I think. I'm so proud of her, and she's one of the most important people in my life. And I love her not only as her brother, but as a friend. I mean, the depth of conversations we have and her take on the world and just the joy that we have when we come together.
Well, a shout out to Mags.
Yeah, shout out to Mags.
If you're watching this,
Absolutely.
You go, girl.
She's amazing.
We're going to need some legal counsel in a couple of years. Hopefully not. But now at least we know where to go.
I'm excited. As the business grows, I'm sure it'll be great to have legal advice along the way.
Oh, hell yeah, it will. Especially what you're in. But I think I even want to just stop and take a pause moment to say to anyone listening, like, and it's maybe a theme that's flowed on from the last episode, is just actually taking a moment and time out, in terms of the ones we love around us, just ask, are you okay? Like, how are you doing today?
Sure.
Because it feels like that headspace we're speaking of with anxiety and pressures, whether it's a work colleague or somebody, like I found talking to a psychologist, and my stint was much shorter, but many people I've spoken to now who talk to a psychologist on many levels, the connection of the outlet, like once you actually just start speaking, the human mind is a weird thing. And sometimes it's been bottled up for so long that someone just saying, actually, I'm having a shitty day and this is why, can make all the difference. And I don't think, with Mags or with you guys as a couple, it transcends age. If someone's 8 years old, or they're 15, or they're 25, or they're 85. I think you can see when someone's down. I don't know if you've ever looked at someone and thought, well, I'm going to miss my train. I've got to go, but I hope that person's okay.
Sure.
Like, I think we've all had that moment. And I guess that's what I'm saying. We haven't. Just maybe slow down and look at the world around you, because just, even a stranger just standing. Sometimes my wife says to me, you're standing at a traffic light, there's a stranger there. And you've just kind of, like, sometimes I'll just engage with someone because they look like lonely. And again, presumptuous of me, I shouldn't do that. But generally they land up smiling. I land up smiling. Occasionally there's a cuddle that's been in there. But I think just walking away and thinking, that person's day, and I think about your teacher. That there was maybe one conversation where they might have said to you, like, are you enjoying this? Or what's happening at school? And I've got something I want you to try. Like, it might have changed your life forever.
And then the flip side of it, not to go too heavy, but I lost one of my best mates last year.
I remember
and
it was a similar time as my mum.
Actually, it really was. And the reason that the hardness around that was I was like one of the last people he called on the day that he passed. And his number popped up on the phone, and I was talking to my wife at the moment. And when I talked to Pete, we always had the best conversations that would go for about 40, 50 minutes. So I just rejected that call, thinking, I'm going to talk to him on the weekend anyway. And then got the news later that night that he had passed. And so, not that you should live in a state of anxiety that you're going to miss the moment to connect with those around you. But people are lonely and people are going through stuff. And the difference you can make by just actually stopping and pausing to connect with that human is going to make a huge difference. Selfishly, sometimes you'll find more to you. I know I used to just have this mentality of just using what you had. And so my little sister, before she came to live with us, lived on the Central Coast. So I couldn't visit her very often. But what I did have is a 50-minute commute and AirPods. And so every Wednesday we would have Wednesday Club, where I would call her just to check in and chat.
Oh, wow.
And then cool. That formed her outlet. And for me, though, it was like great for me because it took the focus off everything I thought I was worried about and put into perspective, everyone's going through something. I mean, those moments of connection, whether they're on the street with strangers or family and loved one that you haven't checked in on a while, I think it makes a huge difference.
Massive, like just seeing it from the other person's side. But even, again, we throw out words like therapist and psychologist, but that's my point. Like at the end of the day, what do? You go there and speak.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think we all have a gift. We just may not have tapped into it, that it's being the listener as well.
Yeah.
And that's something, I'm very fast paced, and it gives me emotion because I've got mentors around me and the feedback and I've, personal coach and things to help slow my world down. And one of the biggest advice was, 2 ears, one mouth. You've got 2 ears and one mouth. It should be proportionate. Do more listening than speaking.
Amazing.
And I actively try that.
Yeah.
And it literally, it's those moments where you are listening that you find the little nuggets, and sometimes you don't have to do anything, but just phoning someone and saying, how are you going? Talk to me. What's happening? And I'm very close with my brothers, but my one brother particularly is very good at, calling and what's going on and staying in the know.
Yeah.
And I think, like you saying, if that's a role that one can fulfill, it's so much more powerful than anyone knows, whether it's someone elderly who's just not around much company anymore.
Yeah.
However their circumstances landed. But wow, no, it's an incredible story, Darcy. And I think exploring then the next frontier for Darcy and maybe lifting it up a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
In the theme of outside your comfort zone, it's what I want to unpack is, like, if I said this whirlwind's going on, but it's all this exciting new stuff for you.
Yeah.
So presumably with your sister, things have settled. Like you're saying, just excelling. There's a bit of stability, it sounds like, which is
absolutely
awesome. In terms of like your next steps, and let's just say the last 6 months, where have you pushed yourself more than ever?
Oh, I think business is where I love pushing myself because it's untapped. The only limit you have is yourself and your beliefs, and often limiting beliefs that you put on yourself and then realize are bullshit.
Yeah,
because you get to the other side of them and you go, why was I worried about that? It all worked out. So in terms of where we're going and what we're trying to build is, I want to build a company that really is leading in the space of podcast production. I think we are unique in that a lot of companies at the moment are setting up shop and they just want to own the rights of a podcast, whether that's the IP or the advertising money. And we take a different approach where we are just so passionate about production, ensuring your idea is formulated in the best possible way, ensuring you're using the right equipment, whether you're recording in a studio, recording from home, and getting that out there onto Spotify and Apple. The great thing is we know how to do that. And so we take great joy in doing that for anyone who walks through our doors, whether that's a corporation or an individual. And so I am gung-ho. This company has grown so quickly at a rate of about 75% year on year. I want to keep pushing that. I want to build a company that is sustainable. I want to build a company where the culture is different to what I experienced in radio, in that it is open with thoughts and feelings. That's actually something we do on a Friday. We have thoughts and feelings where our team can just go around the table, and often I can get roasted in that moment or we can share a funny moment, or we can just share that together. I'm very limited of time. We have such limited time. So when it comes to pushing the thing, I just want to continue to make it bigger and better. And so for us, that has introducing video has been a whole new frontier that we're taking on, because we know how popular it is and how important it is having the visual to this audio storytelling. But from here, I mean, we've got a brand new person starting literally today as we record this podcast.
Awesome. Incredible.
Number 4. And I would love to say that in 2 years, maybe we have this chat again and it's 8 people and we're leading the marketplace.
And the rest.
Yeah, I mean, and the rest. So it's unstoppable. I'm really excited to just push it as much as we can. We have a fantastic team. Shout out to Phil, who's recording this podcast as we speak.
Yeah.
It would be remiss of us not to shout out the people like Phil and Maddie behind the scenes who have bought into their vision, and not only bought into it, but bought their skills and their passion and their commitment to our clients. That's what I'm most excited about. It's no longer the Darcy show, which it was in radio, where you can win awards and you're the sole producer on a show. It's now about, what can Team ProPodcast achieve together? And let's rise in that together and be respectful, but also have a shit ton of fun on the way. And our team, the banter for our team is out of control.
It must be.
And it's such a wonderful dynamic because it offsets now that pressure. And it must be said too, the anxiety is still there.
So I can certainly endorse the team and the professionalism. And I think ease, that's the most, like for me, I didn't know how to go. There's always that question, I can go out and do it myself. So on the one hand, you offer that as well, but you make it so easy. And I think it's, like I said, for me, a lot of the coaching and the guidance that you've provided is second to none.
Amazing.
Goes without saying. But what I also want to do is kind of pry that layer back. So on the one hand, we've spoken about your business planning and trajectory, and I think it's also the concept of actually having goals. You probably have them written down and knowing that you're achieving them, which is a huge thing. It's easy to speak it. You often tell people, you've got your goals for your business. And they're like, I know them all.
Yeah.
But if you said, can you give me the piece of paper that those goals are on? So, and I think, again, it's a theme from what we were saying before, where there's all this anxiety and worry. And I've found it's, wisdom I'll share, but it was shared with me, is not deliberating on making decisions. Just make them. Make them quick. Because I think you'll agree, once you did, then stuff just falls into place. And there's always going to just be two outcomes. It's one way or the other or down the middle, but you're moving forward. And when you're stuck in that cloudy space of procrastination, it doesn't really go anywhere. So that didn't really answer my question, although it did help because knowing that the business is, I expected it from you, because if you're quitting a 6-figure job, and you've come from this really hard background. I've referenced it before, like David Goggins. I've done his 48-hour challenge. For the camera, I'll just you see it here.
Yes. Happy days.
But that, he came from an abusive situation, and there's many, many, many stories. And I think it's what you do with that resilience that counts. So kudos to you guys. Like you're the fierce leader, the fearless warrior, and that's good. But what I want to ask you now is, you described all this serious anxiety that led you to a point in your life where you almost hit the peak of the mountain. And one thing we say at work is, you said a lot of people, what's the goal? The goal is to climb the mountain, get to the top. But that's actually not the goal. The goal is to get the team safely back down, right? Because it doesn't help perishing, hitting the goal. So I think, and that's the next thing, when you think of that metaphor and you think, okay, my goal was always to get to the top of the mountain. But it's almost double the journey coming back down and getting everyone down safely. And now your team's going to not be 4 people at the top, it should be 8 in 2 years' time, to quote you. But talk to me about, so maybe anxiety is the wrong word, but like the stresses and the coping mechanisms. Like, how do you feel now in your own business? There's payroll, there's people to worry about, there's their families to worry about. Do you find there's still this different level of anxiety that's shifted?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, talk to me about that.
I think we call it controlled chaos because when you're running a small business, you don't have the luxury of having an IT department. So if something goes wrong, it's on you. You want to add cameras to your business? It's on you to research that. You want to add a new person? Guess who's writing the ad? It is like, oh my goodness. And my wife wouldn't let me off the hook if I sat here and was going, oh, it's wonderful.
It's easy.
Because it's not. It's really hard and it's really difficult daily. And I guess the change, though, to use your mountain analogy, before engaging with psychology, it was fulfilling, I didn't come from a safe background, so I'm going to do everything in my power to get successful, get financially successful, and have that safety blanket. And then you get to the top of the mountain and you go, that's not going to help what's going on inside of you.
Correct.
So now it's understanding that the mountain isn't to become the most successful person ever. It's actually to create something that I want to create out of a place I want to create it. And that's a real difference. That is a real difference of going, okay, I understand this controlled chaos is happening. I understand that daily, because for Scope, we're engaging with about 60 people at any one given time. That brings its whole set of challenges.
Time constraints. Communication.
I'm a nerd for it. I love systems and processes, and that is a coping mechanisms of building great systems.
Well, I was going to say, like the OCD you described before, has that followed you?
Oh, yeah.
Like in a different way.
It's wonderful at times. It's wonderful because you talk about a process, it gets so stuck in my head until we have to perfect it. That has some real benefits and some real drawbacks at the same time.
No, and I share all those things because and I've had like junior team on our team at work. I've had junior people come in and that, with these little brilliant things like done is better than perfect.
Right. Yeah.
And it's weird because I have those same tendencies. Like sometimes you can sit and stare at that thing and you realize, hang on, and again, focusing on the objective, what does this thing really need to do? Does it need to be 100%?
Yes.
Because it's, even every masterpiece I think is never perfect, but it's on the wall and people are paying big bucks for it.
I love what you said of do things and do them quickly. And I've learned that because the great thing about the business is it now challenges me where I don't actually have the time or bandwidth to make it perfect. It just has to be practical.
It's got to work.
And it's got to work and it's got to be we also do link it back to the customer experience. Provided it's providing the customer experience with what we want it to be, great, action that. And you have to learn to delegate.
And that's, I think also there's a couple of books, but like letting go of the vine, that you trust that there's someone around you who you've hired because they're a little more intelligent at that thing than you or I will ever be.
Amazingly so.
And that's incredible. And also it's funny because there's just a theme you were touching on before. I heard on the radio the other night that they were talking about generations and names, with weird names that people are giving parents and things. And this concept of a nickname.
Right.
And the mother said that nicknames don't transform through generations.
Right.
And so I hear these little things and often I like psychoanalyze them, the OCD in me. But the reason I'm saying that is I think around me, I'm very lucky. I've got like some super successful, really wealthy, but you'd never know it, right?
Right, yes.
Mentors, people, just watching them, and how they, so things like making quick decisions, you see the pace that they run at because they don't have and you would have seen this in your world, ad infinitum. But the point I'm making is I think it's a bit like a nickname. And if you stop to think about that, like as the generations move, the nickname was very personal to that person. And I think to parallel it when like you or I, if we've been in jobs before, it's almost like you're living in a one-dimensional place that if you leave that job, someone else fills it. When you're building your own business, you could do the same thing. You can just achieve an outcome and that's not really helping the world. No. But if you actually step back and you're growing now, and that's why I'm saying this, and you step back and you say, what's the legacy I leave behind? Is it a nickname that comes and goes and it's trend and it's, a podcast just here for now? And, the podcast of the future today, you speak of radio, I'm in radio. You're not. You're in digital media. And the beauty is you've taken this one channel and it's exponential through TikTok and social and radio and, it's awesome. But I think what you leave behind is this legacy. It sounds like that's the leap you're taking now where it's all of those things, delegating. It's don't get stuck on my OCD. And we're seeing this at work now. We're 5.5 years in, the team's growing, but it almost hits a point where if you don't let go, you're not going to achieve the goals you set out to achieve. And in this case, it's impact more than it is profit.
Yes.
That's what it sounds like.
Yes.
You need the coin to keep it going and growing and feed more families as you hire people. But I think there's something really powerful about it's not even the exit strategy because that's what some startups, they start up to achieve an exit. Sure. And it's like the Uber thing. And but it's actually what is the impact I'm leaving behind? And it may not be you sitting behind the driver's wheel.
Sure.
So I don't know if you're experiencing that or if you're feeling that. And it's kind of the coping mechanisms to help put in place the systems now that the team can do it, not just you.
Absolutely. Everything you're saying, it's still a process of letting go control. Whenever I do it, be that hire a new person, it always works far better than I ever thought it would be. But it's building up that muscle memory of like, it's okay. It's okay to let go of that control. And
finding the right people, I guess, and the culture.
Finding the right people and the right culture and the right fit. And you're absolutely right. I mean, profit is really important. Profit is a wonderful tool to help because we reinvest a lot of the profit back into making the experience better and increasing the market share. All of that's really important. You can have a really great impact in the business space and profit is really important. I don't think it's a dirty word. I think it's a really key thing, but there's certainly no exit strategy. We are excited that we get to play in this space,
awesome.
Have our impact in this industry in the way that we want to do that. Profit will come from that and then opportunities will come from that. So as we sit here, we're really excited that we've got the number one podcast in Australia at the moment for 4 consecutive weeks and they could have gone with anyone and for their production, they're with us. We're so proud of that.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And I think you have to have a bit of playful energy in it. You have to take your ego out of it and you have to go, we get to play in this sandbox called podcasting at the moment. What do we want to build? What do we want to make? What do we want to play? Who do we want to welcome into that to do it with us? And I think that will serve us well in the long run.
No doubt, Darcy. Like your attitude and your energy is so awesome. Like it's viral, and it's an amazing approach that you have. And I think anyone that's going to work with you is just going to love it. So I think maybe in closing, I want to ask you what, in terms of the world and what the world can take away from Darcy today.
Interesting.
And kind of stepping you outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
What is that one thing you would love to share with the world?
Ooh.
That you could really help inspire people to push them to the edge?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing I can share is if there's something inside of you that is pushing for a change, be that a relationship, a business, it's that small voice that is inside of you. And certainly I had it of like, oh, I really want to do this podcast business. Just do it.
Yeah.
Because you can always recover if it doesn't go your way. But what you can't recover is if you don't do it and the time passes and you miss your opportunity. And I love the saying of like, sure, maybe the best time for your idea that's sitting in your head was 10 years ago, but the second best time to do it is today. you know?
Make today the next day, the first day of the rest of your life.
100%. Because if I sat in fear in that production studio in the radio land and waited 2 years, I would be 2 years behind where we're at now and would have missed some really key opportunities and sliding door moments. And I just think it's important to know that I really think there's a plan for all of us that is unfolding in real time. And you're going to have to make some crossroad tough decisions, but do it.
Yeah.
Just do it. And I think you'll find that whether it's God or the universe will meet you where you're at, and your energy absolutely changes when you position yourself out of that comfort zone. Truly, not even using a cliche. It's like you step outside of that comfort zone, that is where magic happens.
And that's awesome. It's so true, and it's so hard because it's, we on the show, we're always looking for a definition.
Right.
But I think it is what you make of it. And as you've experienced, hopefully anyone who's pushed their own envelope and reimagined the way they see themselves and what they do, taking out what you're saying, I think it's just have the guts. Make sure you've got things in place, obviously. Don't take stupid risk.
Yeah.
But if it feels like the stars around you will align, just take that leap.
Yeah.
Get
absolutely.
it done. Jump outside the comfort zone and make life happen. So look, it goes without saying, Darcy, that if anyone needs to get in touch with you, ProPodcast Production on Google, they'll find you.
We're top of Google, which makes it nice and easy.
Exactly. You've done a great job.
But ProPodcastProduction.com, you can literally just pop your email in and you get an email from me direct. It's not a sales funnel. It's actually just me writing that email to you. So certainly if you want to connect, please reach out.
Yeah. And I can talk from firsthand experience. It is a real experience. It's easy. It's seamless. You guys just make it happen. You're clearly masters of the domain. So I do encourage anyone thinking of the next great idea that the world needs to know to reach out, get in touch. It's been an absolute pleasure today.
I've enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, me too. Totally loved it. Always difficult because we're unscripted.
Yeah.
And, most importantly, that our listeners can take out what they need to from today. I think there's a lot of awesome nuggets in there. And we'll see what Phil can do with this.
Happy days. Work your magic, Phil.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to Outside Your Comfort Zone with Glenn Miller, your comfort zone coach. If you like what you hear, help spread the word. Subscribe to the podcast and invite a friend. For show notes, links, and extra goodies, visit comfortzonecoach.com.au.